I think she had a gambling problem in this, specifically when she was like my age. I can't imagine leading this kind of luxurious life where I live in the French countryside and I gamble all evening as I give the men a run for their money. Hey guys, it's Nicole. Welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. Are you good? Today I have my first book related video. I wanted to do kind of like a recap / rating of all of the books I read in 2020. So I set a Goodreads goal to read 50 books this last year. I only managed to read 42. I usually come very close, like I think the year before it was 43, but in 2018 I did make it to 73. So I maybe want to shoot for 80 this year. I'm not completely sure. I still set it at 50, but I know I'm capable. Last year was a little bit weird in more ways than one. Definitely in the sense that I was reading a lot of different genres. It kind of goes all over the place, so bear with me. On one hand, it was kind of like revisiting my childhood favorites, and then on the other hand, it was like Soviet literature. I don't even know what I like to read. I guess the answer is honestly everything. I'm a very curious person. I'm like a sponge. So let's go ahead and look at my Goodreads statistics for 2020. So I read 8,862 pages in 2020. I'm already a quarter of that amount into 2021, so that's a little depressing. I don't think 2020 was the most productive reading year for me. I also did not have any books rated below a 3-star, which usually doesn't happen, but then again, I usually read more. And let's get into all of the books that I read and my quick thoughts on them. I wrote down some notes just to remember, and I apologize ahead of time for my failure to remember everything. When I do this next year, which I am going to do, I will have written down all of my thoughts immediately after reading the books. The ones later in the year, of course, are going to be more fresh in my mind. What's funny is we start off the year with middle grade kids books, and as the year progresses, we get into some intense Soviet literature that greatly disturbed me. And if that isn't a good representation of the straight up mood of 2020, I don't know what is. So I started off by reading one of my childhood favorites, Holes. Definitely started the year off strong. What I really love about this book is the flashbacks to the past and how they interconnect with the story that happens in the present. And there's kind of some issues of race in this book that I didn't understand until I was older, really, and those were done really well, I think. This was a 5 out of 5-star book. The movie is also really good. Next, I read Stanley Yelnats' Survival Guide to Camp Green Lake. This is a very short sequel to Holes. I wouldn't even really call it a sequel. It was just like a little more insight behind the correctional facility that Holes takes place at. It reminds me a little bit of Ned's Declassified School Survival Guide, if any of you watched that growing up. It was fun, but it wasn't like anything groundbreaking for me personally, just like a continuation of the setting at Holes more than anything. I'd recommend this to somebody who kind of wants to be in that environment a little bit longer. I rated this one a 3 out of 5. Next, I read a short story, What You Pawn, I Will Redeem. I had a very short attention span in 2020, so I was definitely trying to dabble in shorter stories, of course, until I picked up Soviet literature. So basically what happens in this story is this guy tries to buy back something that was stolen from his grandmother. He sees it in a pawn shop, and if I remember correctly, he kept drinking away the money that he was raising in order to buy it back, and that was a bit frustrating. But the guy who's trying to buy it back is homeless, and I think it did a pretty good depiction of kind of what that's like, and it also dealt with some addiction and kind of describes how that's a very debilitating thing to be dealing with. And people kind of have this idea of like, well, why don't you just save money? And it shows, I think it's a 24-hour period that the story takes place over, and it shows how it's just impossible to like actually save anything. And it's really sad because I think the character wants to get back what was stolen from his grandmother because she's gone now, and I think he wants like that piece of her back, like thinking it will bring her back. I think there's a lot of like symbolism in this story. For me, it's a 3 out of 5, just like based on my own life, I guess. It's hard for me to sympathize with alcoholics in particular. I am a huge supporter of giving people resources, especially when they are homeless and struggling with addiction, which is a disease. I don't know, it's hard for me to read about alcoholics. I don't enjoy that a whole lot. A lot of people have really liked this story though, so I wouldn't discourage anyone from reading it. Next, I read Small Steps, which was a true Holes sequel. It was kind of wild. It was definitely fun. It's not quite as good as the first one, but I like that it followed a different character from the whole story other than Stanley, who was the main protagonist. Most of what I remember from this book was an issue with the pop star that they meet. Some sort of toxic relationship she had with her manager, not like relationship, like romantic relationship, but just like a toxic dynamic, which I know is common, especially with like teen stars. It actually had a plot, and it was really interesting other than the little mini sequel that I read beforehand. So I would give this one a 4 out of 5. Next, I read Araby. I think that's how you pronounce it. This is a short story from 1914 about a boy who's going through his first infatuation. I remember this story having a lot of themes of realism. Like, I'm pretty sure this white boy falls in love with the idea of this woman, and there's also a circus involved, but it's a circus of 1914, which means there's some exploitation of non-Western people and just kind of a fascination with any other type of culture. And they kind of think of these circus people as like super exotic just because they're not white. And I think this little boy was building up this idea of this circus in his head. When he actually goes and sees it, it's not at all what he expected. I remember the writing being really well done. It's very daydreamy and obsessive. It showcases the consequences of falling in love with the idea of something. And I would rate this one a. So next I read Sunny's Blues. I wish I remembered more about this because I rated it pretty highly. It's another short story set in the 1950s, and it involves two brothers. One is a teacher and the other is a musician, and it deals with a lot of themes of music, addiction, and family dynamics, and it has really incredible writing, so I rated this one a 4 out of 5. Next we get more into the favorites of my childhood. Back to children's books. Hey, some of those short stories were heavy. So the next book is Mary Poppins in the Park. This one was a drug trip. A lot of children's books are, honestly. I didn't like it as much as the previous Mary Poppins books. I also love the movies so much, the original ones and the newer one that came out with Emily Blunt. That one's also really good. And while I'm on this topic, if you haven't seen Saving Mr. Banks, please go watch it. It's on Disney Plus if you have that. I love the family. I love Mary Poppins. It's my pure childhood, and I rated this one a 3 out of 5. Next, I read Mary Poppins and Cherry Tree Lane. This one was a bit slow. The entire book took place over one evening, which usually each chapter is like a whole different day or event. So I rated this one a 3 out of 5. And lastly, I read Mary Poppins and the House Next Door. I remember liking this one more, but not as much as the first three, like the original first three in the series. The first three were 5 stars. The plot of this one is really interesting because I think all of the people in this neighborhood, they have this abandoned house in the neighborhood, and they all imagine their ideal neighbor living in that house. And that's kind of a cool concept because they all have a different person pictured in their head. And then someone real actually moves in, and everybody's really displaced by this fact. And they were using this empty house as a fantasy for like their personal ideal neighbors. So that was a cool concept, and I gave it a 4 out of 5. Next, I read another short story, A Jury of Her Peers. Oh God, I love this one so much. There are these two women who pretty much uncover the truth of a rural murder investigation. It's a feminist work, honestly, and it's kind of about the unspoken language between women. Especially during that time, women couldn't really voice their opinions, so it was more of a body language kind of thing and behavior, and women really understood other women because of this, because they knew what they were going through. So it's kind of like while men were not understanding women were able to understand each other. It also includes instances of men being super dismissive of women's intelligence when in reality, the women ended up knowing more than them. I'm pretty sure this was adopted into a play, and this is definitely a must-read. I rated this a 5 out of 5. Next, I read The Story of an Hour, another great short story with feminist undertones, if I remember correctly. What happens in this book is there's a woman with a heart condition, and her husband is killed. She finds this out and is sad. Then suddenly, she's like, whoa, wait a second, this is amazing. Now I don't have to live my life for anyone else or be controlled by anyone. And that's a really sad concept that women were like trapped in marriages during this time, but that's how life went then. So there's a lot of emotions in this. It's the story of an hour. It takes place over a very short time period. It's another book kind of about the insight into the lives of women, especially during such an oppressive time for women. And I rated this one a 4 out of 5. It's not as mind-boggling as A Jury of Her Peers. A Jury of Her Peers, So next I read another short story of feminism, The Yellow Wallpaper. This one deals with an ill woman who has a doctor for a husband, and he's very controlling. And she says she'll be better if she goes outside or she talks to people. She's like unsocialized, she's lonely, she needs some fresh air, and he doesn't let her do any of this. He pretty much says he knows best, and she's stuck inside this room feeling insane. Most of us would. It led me to think about the experience that women have had in medical care just in general throughout history. Like if women ever wanted to do anything, they were seen as insane. Like if a woman wanted to have a job, she was seen as insane. Women wanting to go outside, they were seen as insane. Doing anything unaccompanied by a man, basically, which is so normal today, but back then, something was wrong with her. When in reality, the reason they were feeling badly was because they were like being told what to do. Anyways, did you know the term hysterectomy and hysteria are related for a reason? Because they thought removing anything that made you more female would cure you of your insanity. Because females are inherently insane, right? So I rated this one a 5 out of 5, really good concepts. Next, I got into more actual books. So I read The Bad Seed, which was another, I think this was written a while ago. I think it was written in the 50s. This one is so incredible. I have to read you the description because I don't know how to do it justice. You've probably heard of this one. It's a classic. It blew my mind. What happens to ordinary families into whose midst a child serial killer is born? This spine-tingling tale investigates a mother's concerned suspicions surrounding several mysterious accidental deaths that all connect back to her 8-year-old daughter, Rhoda. It was written in 1954, It really revolutionized the thriller and horror genre because nobody ever, first of all, thought that a woman could be a serial killer, but let alone that a female child could exhibit signs of violence, I guess. So it was very groundbreaking and shocking to people when it first came out. It's also made into a movie. The movie is in black and white. It's really spooky. I'm pretty sure the ending is completely different though, so keep that in mind. It's a really good Halloween read though, and I rated it a 5 out of 5. Next, I read Boys and Girls. This was a really good short story commentary on gender roles and how the sister was raised differently from the brother, which kind of sucks, and that kind of mindset still exists today, despite this story being written like in the 60s. So it really opens your eyes to things, and I rated it a 4 out of 5. Next, I reread the book Distant Waves. This was a reread of probably my favorite book of all time. It's set on the Titanic. It involves ghosts. It has issues of race in it, and Nikola Tesla is there. Am I pronouncing his name right? Tesla?
It's pronounced Nicola. Oh my god, I was pronouncing it how you would pronounce mine.
So the genre is classified as a historical, supernatural romance book, which I would agree with. It's just so good, and when I first picked it out when I was younger, the cover is what really caught my attention. It's just so ghosty and underwater. Spooky dress floating in the water. And when I reread it, it's still really held up for me today. Like, it's just so good. I love a good ghost story. What can I say? 5 out of 5. Next, I read With Fondest Regards. This was a book my mom pushed me into reading despite not even knowing the author. I like the imagery of this book a lot, just kind of the settings she was painting. It's about the life of the author and all the people she'd known, a lot of them being famous. I think there's a chapter on Billie Holiday. It's originally in French, so it's translated into English. Saint Tropez is in there for all the man fans, and it kind of has this romanticized depiction of Saint Tropez before it became like a more populous town. I think she had a gambling problem in this, specifically when she was like my age, and that was very surreal to read about because it was like, I can't imagine leading this kind of luxurious life where I live in the French countryside and I gamble all evening as I give the men a run for their money. It's just fun vibes, but nothing that was really super amazing to me. I rated it a 3 out of 5. Next, I read Flowers for Algernon. Made me cry big time. I'm gonna read you a quick description. So, a mentally challenged man receives an operation that turns him into a genius and introduces him to heartache. And the thing about this story is it's told through diary entries that he writes. So you can see literally his progression of intelligence because of the way he's spelling things and writing. Like, you see it throughout the whole book as he becomes incredibly smart. And they also do the same operation on a mouse, but they do it right before they do it to him, I think. So you see the progression and kind of the assumption of what will happen to him. And it's really sad to think about the things that were done to people who had any sort of mental disabilities, especially in that time. Lobotomies, for example, and how they just weren't treated like people, like really the experimental type of operations. Someone who doesn't have the capability to consent to that and kind of just letting them do it anyways. Now we have laws in place where you have to have a guardian or some kind of caretaker who would make any legal decisions for you, but back then people were just on their own. 5 out of 5, would cry again. I actually have the next book I read. This doesn't happen often because I order a lot from the library since I read so much and I don't have any money. So I read Patron Saints of Nothing next. This is an incredible young adult book. It raises a lot of awareness around the war on drugs that's happening in the Philippines. I was completely unaware around this. It kind of has a little bit of politics from that area. It's completely fiction though, and it's super interesting. It's not like a political book, I guess. It raises a lot of awareness. There's really interesting family dynamics in this and the concept of people in family who don't see eye to eye, and I rated this one a 5 out of 5. Next, I read Christmas Shopaholic, which is like book, God, I don't know, 15 in the Shopaholic series. I have a huge soft spot for this series. If you haven't seen the movie, go watch it. These books will make you laugh out loud. It's also just like a really cozy Christmas read. And I kind of commend these books for the representation around addiction, even if it's like a shopping addiction. Like, she can't stop spending money, and you kind of see how her brain rationalizes her decisions, I guess. So that's really interesting to read about. And I rated it a 4 out of 5. Next, I read Half Magic, more fun children's books. I read these when I was younger and really liked them. It's very much like a fairy tale. It's super like vintagey. There's like illustrations that are so cute, super fun. There's a talking cat in this one. We love that. This one kind of gives me Alice in Wonderland vibes, which I love so much. This was the first book I read in quarantine, I think. It was really good for escapism. I rated this one a 4 out of 5. Next, I read Knight's Castle, the next one in the series. Toy soldiers come to life, basically. Knights and castles and duels. It's really medieval and fun, and I rated it a 4 out of 5. I read the next book, Magic by the Lake. like. This one had to do with water, so of course I was a fan. It wasn't as great as the other two, but it still had a lot of fun adventures. This whole series just makes me think of either like Mary Poppins or Alice in Wonderland. I rated this one a 3 out of 5. Next was The Time Garden. I think this one had to do with time travel, which is a super fun concept to read about. They even see their parents when they were children, and that's trippy, and I rated it a 4 out of 5. Next was Magic or Not. This one had a wishing well in it, which is a super fun plot device, and I rated it 3 out of 5. Next I read The Well Wishers. It's a lot of like children being reckless. There's a witch-like woman in it. We love a good witch. And I think she kidnaps one of the children. There's a lot of fun adventures happening. 3 out of 5, I rated it. Next I read 7-Day Magic, which is the last book in the series. The description says, a 7-day book of magic proves to be fractious for 5 children who must learn the book's rules and tame its magic. I think they're able to escape into the world of their favorite book, which is such a dream. This one was a 4 out of 5. It ended better than the middle ones were. The series is really childlike and nostalgic for me. Since I read some of it when I was a kid, like at the library, I remember checking these books out, and it was really good for quarantine. Honestly, just really light, really childlike, kept me sane. Next, I read Antigone, just going straight into Greek theater now. So the description of that is the daughter of Oedipus and Jocasta. Is it Jocasta or Jocasta? I can't remember. Antigone is an unconventional heroine who pits her beliefs against the king of Thebes in a bloody test of will that leaves few unharmed. Emotions fly as she challenges the king for the right to bury her own brother. Determined but doomed, Antigone shows her inner strength throughout the play. So there's just a main conflict between like law and morals. She thinks she should be able to bury her brother, even though I'm pretty sure he did something that was against the law. He was in trouble when he died, so that's why he's not allowed to have a proper burial. She doesn't think this is right. She's kind of a badass bitch. I rated this one a 4 out of 5. Next I read Hamlet. Now we're on to Shakespeare. I was in a really weird place during quarantine. I specifically remember reading these 2 plays while I was in the apartment next door to me because my apartment had flooded. So Hamlet, I mean, it's kind of what Lion King is based off of, if you don't know. I rated it a 4 out of 5. And next we move back into some children's books that I read when I was a child. Molly Moon's Incredible Book of Hypnotism. I just feel like this is the universal. You see these in the school library in elementary school, and it has the cute little pug on the cover. I was super intrigued by these books. I think I read like the first 2 maybe. I read all of them this time. I was into some deep shit or just reading fairy tales like the entirety of 2020. As I said, I love this book as a child. It's a drug trip and it's super fun. There's a movie out now and I rated it a 4 out of 5. Next I read the second book in the series, Molly Moon Stops the World. Instead of hypnotizing people, she's now stopping time, like freezing it completely. There's a bunch of plot twists, and I rated it a 5 out of 5. You don't see many series where the second book is better than the first book. Next, I read Molly Moon's Hypnotic Holiday. This was a Molly Moon short story type thing. I might have this one, but it's so tiny that I just don't know where it is. Hi! Molly Moon's incredible hypnotic powers have gained her a glamorous existence in New York, where she's often tempted to help unfortunate people improve their lives. But her well-meaning plan to swap the positions of a penniless young tramp and an arrogant millionaire for 24 hours goes hilariously wrong. I kind of remember this one being dark. I can't remember what happens, but I feel like there's like violence. And I rated that one a 3 out of 5. So next I read Molly Moon's Hypnotic Time Travel Adventure. This one takes place in India, deals with time travel, obviously. There's different versions of the characters, which is trippy. Like, present Molly is able to see past Molly, like her when she was a toddler. Maybe future Molly, I can't completely remember. This one gets a little dark too, and I rated it a 3 out of 5. Why was I not liking the dark ones? That's weird. Maybe because I come to these for like peace. Next, I read Molly Moon, Mickey Minus and the Mind Machine. That's a tongue twister. She comes back from the future and can read minds. There's an Asian princess who kidnaps them, and I feel like it gets a little racist, if I'm being completely honest with you. Her name is Princess Fang. She captures them and wants to take their powers for herself, basically. It has a really good plot though, like it's really super fast paced, and I think they're trapped in this castle and it's just ridiculous, and there's like torture happening nearly. It's like, I don't understand how some of these are children's books, if I'm being honest with you. It's really adventurous. It do be weird though. I rated it a 4 out of 5. Next, I read Molly Moon and the Morphing Mystery. Now she starts shapeshifting into animals. I love this one. There was a lot of tension and a great plot. I'm pretty sure there's a plot twist in there, like the person who you think is the villain maybe isn't the villain. And I rated it a 4 out of 5. That one was really fun. And the last book in the series, Molly Moon and the Monster Music. So she now can play every instrument, which is what I've always wanted. Molly becomes intolerable for a lot of this, but for a reason, and it's not real, so maybe it's okay, but it's still just like irritating to read. I feel like there's a K-pop band in this book. Like there's a band of musicians, like a boy band, and they decide to take her on when they realize how talented she is, when really it's just like magic. I think she finds a cursed object. I feel like there's an object that gives her these powers to be able to play any instrument. What is it? it's something. This one's really fun and it involves traveling. Also, I love Rocky so much. He's the like sidekick best friend. He's so cute, so sweet. And I rated this one a 4 out of 5. Next, I read A Doll's House, which is another play, I'm pretty sure. It's a Victorian play written in 1879. It portrays the tragic hypocrisy of Victorian middle-class marriage on the stage. So basically this woman's husband sees her just kind of as a doll and he's very condescending to her. Big tolerated vibes for sure. She's unhappy with her marriage and I rated it a 5 out of 5. Next, I read A Raisin in the Sun. This is a classic. I'm sure you've heard of it. It deals with segregation, racism, money troubles, family dynamics, and forgiveness of certain family members. It's intense and really good. It makes you feel things. So the title of the book is based on a poem by Langston Hughes. I'll read it to you, it's pretty fast. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat, or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load, or does it explode? So it does have a lot of themes about dreams and trying to make those happen, and I rated it a 5 out of 5. Next, I read the selected poems of Emily Dickinson. I love this copy. It has like the gold edges on the pages, and I absolutely love Emily Dickinson's writing. I'm going to do a video on my favorite poems by her, but I got this collection at Barnes & Noble, and I highly recommend it. It's really cute, it's small, and it has just really good selections from her. So if you are unfamiliar with her work, she writes about nature, love, life, mostly death and immortality, but it just makes me really sad to think like how talented she was in all the places that could have taken her, but because she was a woman, she ended up being just stuck in Massachusetts. I don't think she ever even left the state. She wanted to go places, she wanted to do things, and I don't think she ever really even became that well known until after her death, which is really sad. I'm pretty sure she even died in the house she grew up in. That's just trash. And the topics she writes about really make you think of how much death was surrounding these people during that time. Like, you would watch all your relatives die. That doesn't happen often today. You're not like present in the house with them most of the time. And she was just surrounded by death, like people dying from common colds. It was just dark, and she channeled that into this. So I rated this one a 5 out of 5. Next, I got into the Soviet literature that took me the better part of half a year to read, and that's probably why I didn't make it to 50 books. Also, Vlogmas seriously deterred me towards the end. So I read The Unwomanly Face of War, An Oral History of Women in World War II. So all of these books that I read were by the same author, Svetlana Alexievich. I think her books were banned in the USSR because they told a different side than what the government was trying to portray to the people. I really like the writing style of these books because it's done in verbatim interviews. Like, I think she was recording people and then pretty much just writing down what they said word for word. It's just a whole collage of experiences of these people. This book had very intense Soviet women who wanted to fight fascists. That was an interesting concept because I'm related to these women, and most people today wouldn't want to sacrifice themselves for that, but God, they were just so tough, I guess. Really self-sacrificing. What really sucks for these women though is they were treated terribly when they came home. Like, people kind of were under the impression that they were unmarriable because the only reason they went down to the front lines and fought is to like sleep with men, when there are so many tales of these women like brutally killing Nazis. Like, they didn't come to play games. It was not about men at all. So that was just really sad. There was just no respect for them. I had a lot of interesting conversations with my mom about this book since she's from the Soviet Union. I would recommend all of these books to anyone from Russia, Ukraine, or any former USSR countries, and I rated this one a 4 out of 5. Next, I read Last Witnesses, Unchildlike Stories. This book had me bawling. I was not okay in the head after reading this. It was told through interviews of people who went through the Second World War while they were children, so it was through their eyes, and it's just a horrifying concept, honestly, especially because I just remember so clearly when I was little, like, completely idealizing my parents, especially my mom, because she was always with me. You have this idea when you're a child that when you're with your parents, like, nothing bad could ever happen, like, everything, you feel safe when you're with them, but the events these people described happening, or what they saw happen to their parents while the USSR was being invaded by Germany. This was the heaviest book I read this year for sure. It was like almost just deeply disturbing. It was really hard to get through, but I think it's important, and I rated it a 5 out of 5. Next, I read Zinky Boys, which is Soviet voices from the Afghanistan War. This had a lot of veterans coming home and just like not being treated well, especially when they sacrificed so much for their country, but people were really unsupportive of the Afghanistan War. It was really sad to hear the interviews that were done by mothers who had their sons brought home in zinc caskets. That's why it's called Zinky Boys. Someone who reviewed this book said, this is the example of, I think there's a quote that says, "Don't write about the war, write about the burned socks." And that's exactly what she does. It's just the little things. It's like real people. That's what really hits about these books, is like you see their names and a lot of times she lists their occupation. It's really heavy shit. I rated that one a 4 out of 5, and the last book of the year that I read was Voices from Chernobyl, The Oral History of a Nuclear Disaster. This one was also heartbreaking. It had a lot to do with kind of the shadiness of the Soviet government trying to keep things under wraps. It's really sad how many people lost their lives or became really sick when what they did wasn't even something they should have been doing, something that didn't even help the situation, I guess. Like the firefighters, for example. You can't put out a nuclear fire with water. Like, they might have even made it worse, and they ended up hurt from doing this, but they were told to do it. Like, it's so frustrating to read about. There's a story in the very beginning that was an interview that was about a woman whose husband ended up severely burned, and so he was in the hospital in Moscow, and she went to see him, and they asked her if she was pregnant, and she said no. It turns out she actually was pregnant, and so while she was like interacting with him and staying close to him, I guess that exposes her to radiation. But in reality, once somebody is cleaned, correct me if I'm wrong, but what I've heard from, like, there was a video on YouTube with a nuclear physicist explaining how that's incorrect. Once somebody's radioactive clothes have been taken off of them and they've cleaned themselves, they're no longer harmful to other people. It's just they have radioactive damage to their own body. But anyway, so this woman was interacting with him, she was pregnant, and the story goes that when she gave birth, the baby lived for like an hour or something, and the baby had absorbed all the radiation and acted as like a lightning rod, I guess, to protect her. And I don't see how this story also appeared in the Chernobyl HBO series, but with that being factually incorrect, and I also don't understand how it ended up in this book if it was written from survivors' accounts. Like, it was written from the woman's perspective saying that this is what happened to her, but I guess it's just some kind of myth, or like maybe somebody was lying. I don't know. It's just really fishy and strange, but that was the only part that was kind of weird about this book. The very last story in this book really hurts. I like that it was placed at the end because it was a really powerful one. It was just the story of a woman who loved her husband so much, and it detailed how they fell in love when they were younger, and it was told kind of with flashbacks and stories she was remembering after she met him and how much she loved him. It was really heartbreaking. As I said before, these books are told through anecdotes of real people, which just makes it even worse to listen to. It's like a whole chorus of voices talking about their experience with Chernobyl. It just makes it hit harder, honestly. And I rated this one a 5 out of 5. This was another amazing one. This one and The Children of World War II were the ones that really hurt the most. So we're ending that on a really dark note, but isn't that accurate for 2020? So those are all of the books that I read in 2020. Let me know if you guys like this type of content. I'm gonna have some more literature related stuff, like all of my favorite Emily Dickinson poems, but let me know down in the comments what your favorite book was that you read last year, and I will see you guys next week with another video, and I hope you all have an amazing day. Bye guys.